What if the hero you trusted most was the one betraying you all along? What if the man who smiled on camera, shaking hands with wounded soldiers, was secretly funneling billions of dollars meant for them into his own pockets? Imagine veterans, men and women who have given everything, struggling to get the medical care and rehabilitation they were promised, while the prince they believed in lived a life of unchecked luxury. That is exactly the nightmare that is unfolding right now. The Invictus Games, an institution built on hope, courage, and the recovery of injured soldiers, is now at the center of an unprecedented scandal. And at the heart of it, Prince Harry himself. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For years, Prince Harry has been hailed as a modern hero. The media celebrated his dedication to soldiers, his global charisma, and the way he seemed to carry the weight of the military community on his shoulders. Invictus Games, the event he championed, became a symbol of resilience. Soldiers with life-altering injuries competed in front of millions of spectators, showcasing their strength and determination. It was more than just sport. It was therapy. It was hope. It was life. And Prince Harry was the face of it all. The prince who had walked alongside injured veterans, who had listened to their stories, who had promised to fight for them, appeared untouchable. Untouchable, until now. The CEO of Invictus Games, a man whose voice was rarely heard in the glare of international attention, has stepped forward to deliver a bombshell revelation. In a public statement, he alleged that over $1 billion meant for veterans' care did not reach the hospitals, therapy centers, or prosthetic specialists. Instead, according to the CEO, the money disappeared into personal accounts tied directly to Prince Harry. Funds that were intended to rebuild shattered lives were allegedly used to fund an extravagant lifestyle that had little to do with service or charity. Think about that for a moment. $1 billion. A sum so large that it could have transformed thousands of veterans' lives, ensuring access to medical treatment, psychological care, and state-of-the-art rehabilitation. Instead, the money vanished, and the prince who vowed to champion the very people who served alongside him now stands accused of the ultimate betrayal. How did this happen? And why is it only coming to light now? Those are the questions we're about to unravel. But first, let's step back and understand the context, the story that made Prince Harry a hero, and the cracks in that image that now threaten to bring it all crashing down. When the Invictus Games were first launched, the idea was revolutionary. Harry envisioned a global event where injured and ill veterans could compete, not just to test their physical endurance, but to heal emotionally. The public saw smiling athletes, medals awarded, cameras flashing, and a prince who appeared genuinely invested in their well-being. Behind the scenes, however, the structure was far more complex. The organization required meticulous financial management, extensive fundraising, and a board that ensured every dollar donated was accounted for and deployed effectively. It is in this behind-the-scenes complexity that the alleged scandal took root. According to the CEO, discrepancies began to emerge years ago. Initial signs were subtle: unexplained transfers, mismatched accounting entries, vague justifications for unusually large payments. At first, they were dismissed as clerical errors, anomalies easily explained by the scale of international fundraising efforts. But as years passed, the patterns grew impossible to ignore. Whistleblowers, employees, and volunteers within the organization began raising concerns, and internal audits hinted at funds being moved without transparency. The common thread? Prince Harry's involvement. What makes this betrayal particularly gut-wrenching is the contrast between the public narrative and the private reality. On one hand, you had the prince shaking hands with veterans, listening to stories of bravery and suffering, delivering speeches that moved audiences to tears. On the other, according to the CEO and documents now being revealed, there were deliberate financial maneuvers designed to channel money away from those very individuals. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. How can the person who stood as a beacon of hope for the wounded be the same person allegedly undermining their recovery for personal gain? We have to pause and consider the human cost. Imagine Sergeant Michael Turner, a veteran who lost both legs in combat. He was promised specialized prosthetics through funds allocated by the Invictus Games. The moment he was supposed to be fitted for state-of-the-art devices, he was told there were budgetary issues. Meanwhile, According to the CEO, the same funds had been diverted into accounts benefiting Prince Harry directly. Turner's disappointment is only one of thousands of similar stories. Every misappropriated dollar represents therapy delayed, mobility limited, and dreams deferred. These are not abstract numbers. They are real lives, real suffering. And the revelation that the man who once stood as a champion may have been complicit in this deception shatters the very foundation of trust. So why now? Why is this scandal erupting at this moment? The CEO has revealed that he could no longer remain silent. He had tried internal channels, raising concerns with advisors, accountants, and board members, only to be met with dismissive responses or stonewalling. "I watched in silence for too long," the CEO stated, his voice heavy with emotion during the public disclosure. "But I cannot, in good conscience, allow the legacy of the Invictus Games to be tainted by betrayal. The veterans deserve the truth." The CEO didn't just make allegations, he presented evidence. Internal emails, banking records, and transaction logs were released, showing a trail that allegedly leads directly to the prince's accounts. Each document, meticulously detailed, paints a picture of mismanagement, deliberate concealment, and personal enrichment. This is not conjecture or rumor. This is forensic-level documentation, now exposed for the world to see. And yet, despite the gravity of the claims, the story has only just begun to break in mainstream media. The world is waking up to a new narrative, one where the prince who positioned himself as a champion of the wounded is now facing accusations of betrayal, misappropriation, and financial misconduct. Social media is ablaze with outrage, disbelief, and speculation. Memes, hot takes, and viral commentary dominate feeds worldwide, amplifying the shock of the revelation. The narrative is no longer just about royal charity. It's about accountability, transparency, and the lives of those who were promised support. It is worth asking, what will this mean for Prince Harry personally and professionally? Beyond legal implications, the scandal threatens his credibility, his philanthropic influence, and his public image. Already, questions are being raised about whether he will continue to play any role in charitable organizations or royal-affiliated projects. The CEO's statement included a stark warning. The evidence cannot be ignored. If Prince Harry seeks to maintain any semblance of integrity, he must answer for these actions. And there's another dimension, the broader royal family and their response. While members of the royal circle often operate in the shadows, maneuvering discreetly to manage crises, this is a public spectacle of unprecedented proportions. How will this impact not just Harry, but the monarchy's reputation as a whole? When billions of dollars are allegedly misappropriated under the auspices of a charitable initiative tied to the crown, the repercussions extend far beyond the individuals directly involved. What makes this scandal even more compelling is the contrast between perception and reality. For years, the media has painted Harry as the empathetic, compassionate prince, committed to social causes. He has been photographed walking alongside veterans, hugging families, visiting hospitals, and speaking passionately about recovery and resilience. These images now serve as a bitter irony, juxtaposed against allegations that he manipulated the very system designed to help those he publicly championed. The tension between public image and private actions is palpable, and it drives a story that is as riveting as it is disturbing. As we begin to unpack the evidence, one cannot ignore the emotional weight of the situation. This is a story of betrayal on multiple levels, of veterans, of supporters, of the public who place their trust in both the prince and the Invictus Games organization. It is a story of money, power, and privilege colliding with accountability and justice. And at the center of it all stands Prince Harry, facing allegations that could irreversibly alter his legacy. But the most shocking elements are yet to come. The CEO has hinted at revelations that go beyond the misappropriation of funds, communications, secret agreements, and internal conspiracies that suggest the betrayal may have been more systemic than anyone could have imagined. These details, once fully revealed, promise to rewrite the narrative surrounding the Invictus Games and Prince Harry's role in the organization. And so, we arrive at the cliffhanger that sets the stage for what is to come. The prince who once inspired millions with his dedication to wounded veterans now stands accused of one of the most serious allegations a public figure can face: exploiting those he pledged to serve for personal gain. The CEO's evidence, the whistleblower accounts, and the internal documents paint a portrait of betrayal that shakes the foundation of trust at the heart of the Invictus Games. What would you do if someone you trusted to protect the most vulnerable was the very person undermining them? That's the question now gripping the world as the full scale of the Invictus Games scandal begins to emerge. Prince Harry, the prince who vowed to put veterans first, is facing allegations that could destroy everything he built. Or at least everything people thought he built. And it all started with a trail of financial breadcrumbs that no one expected to find. The CEO of the Invictus Games, a figure who had remained quietly in the background for years, suddenly stepped into the spotlight, turning whispers into a roar heard around the globe. In his first public statement, he didn't hold back. His words were heavy with indignation, but also with a hint of incredulity, as if he still couldn't fully grasp the audacity of what had allegedly been done under his nose. "We trusted him," the CEO said. "We believed he was dedicated. But the evidence shows a different story. A story of betrayal, deception, and greed. At the core of the allegations is a staggering sum, $1 billion. That's right, $1 billion meant for injured veterans' medical care, rehabilitation, therapy, and essential support. Money that could have transformed lives, given new hope, and provided opportunities for veterans to reclaim a semblance of normalcy. Instead, according to the CEO, the funds were allegedly redirected to accounts tied to Prince Harry himself. Personal luxury, private ventures, unknown indulgences. Every dollar that didn't reach its intended destination represents a story of hardship, delay, and disappointment. And the irony is painful. For years, Prince Harry has been portrayed as a champion of the wounded. Media outlets around the world have documented his tireless advocacy, from attending hospital visits to speaking at international conferences, to personally meeting families of soldiers who suffered life-altering injuries. Photos of him hugging veterans, wiping tears from their cheeks, promising change, they were everywhere. These images became synonymous with hope. But now, under the shadow of these allegations, they take on a darker, more disturbing hue. Were they genuine moments of empathy, or carefully curated appearances masking a far more troubling reality? The financial trail uncovered by the CEO reveals a pattern of transfers that raise serious questions. Large sums were moved under vague descriptions: operational expenses, event funding, consultancy fees. Some payments were routed through offshore accounts, others through shell companies with no clear purpose. When scrutinized alongside correspondence from internal accountants and board meetings, a picture begins to emerge, a picture of funds being shifted away from veterans and towards unknown destinations. And in several instances, according to the CEO, approvals for these transactions came directly from Prince Harry. It's easy to get lost in the numbers, but behind each misappropriated dollar is a human story. There's Lieutenant Sarah Collins, a veteran who suffered severe injuries in active duty. She was promised comprehensive rehabilitation through programs funded by Invictus Games donations. Months turned into years, and her treatment was repeatedly delayed due to supposed budget shortfalls. According to internal documents revealed by the CEO, the funds were available, but redirected elsewhere. Collins and countless others waited, hoping that the prince who had publicly vowed to support them would follow through. Instead, they were left navigating bureaucratic obstacles while the alleged mismanagement unfolded. And the timing of this revelation could not be more explosive. Prince Harry has been in the public eye for decades, and his transition away from royal duties seemed to position him as a philanthropist with a global reach. He was no longer just a prince. He was a brand, a symbol of progressive royal engagement, and a figure many believed would continue to impact social causes positively. But the CEO's accusations suggest that the prince's brand may have been built on a foundation that was far less noble than anyone realized. Critics have begun asking a crucial question: how did such alleged misappropriation go unnoticed for so long? The answer, according to insiders, lies partly in trust and partly in the structure of the organization. Prince Harry's involvement and celebrity status created an aura of authority. Few dared to challenge decisions openly, and even when concerns were raised, they were often dismissed. "We assumed he was above scrutiny," one former board member admitted privately. He's a prince. We thought he was untouchable. We thought he was incorruptible. We were wrong. But this is not just a story about unchecked power or misplaced trust. It's about the systemic failures that allowed alleged mismanagement to occur. The Invictus Games, while a symbol of resilience and determination, relied heavily on the personal influence and charisma of Prince Harry. That influence, while beneficial for publicity and fundraising, may have created an environment where oversight was weakened. Staff members, eager to support the cause and respect the prince, may have overlooked irregularities, assumed explanations were valid, or feared reprisal for questioning high-level decisions. The CEO, however, refused to remain silent. In a detailed briefing, he revealed internal emails, audit reports, and bank statements that traced the movement of funds. These documents suggest a deliberate pattern, one that cannot be easily dismissed as error or oversight. Multiple whistleblowers corroborated the findings, providing accounts of meetings where financial questions were deflected and promises were made that never materialized. Together, the evidence paints a portrait of a system exploited at its highest levels, with devastating consequences for the very people it was intended to serve. And now the world is reacting. Social media is ablaze. Veterans organizations are demanding accountability, and legal experts are analyzing the potential ramifications. Some are calling for immediate investigations, while others speculate about criminal charges. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's public appearances and social media accounts have gone silent, a rare retreat from the spotlight he once commanded so confidently. Silence, in this case, speaks volumes. It's important to recognize that this scandal cuts deeper than money. It challenges the core narrative of who Prince Harry is, or at least who the public believed him to be. For years, he has presented himself as a protector of the vulnerable, a champion of those who have sacrificed everything. Now, with allegations of diverting funds intended for injured veterans, the image is fractured. The public is left asking, was the prince's dedication ever genuine, or was it a carefully crafted persona designed to benefit him personally? Adding to the tension is the international scope of the Invictus Games. Countries around the world participate, sending athletes, volunteers, and funds to support the events. Alleged financial mismanagement at this scale doesn't just affect UK veterans. It impacts families, athletes, and organizations globally. Donations from corporations and governments may now be subject to review, trust eroded, and future participation jeopardized. The implications are massive, and the fallout is just beginning to unfold. And while the world watches, one cannot ignore the human stories at the heart of this scandal. Veterans who once looked up to Prince Harry as a beacon of hope now face a bitter reality. The support they expected may have been compromised. Stories of missed treatments, delayed surgeries, and shattered trust are emerging, painting a portrait of pain and frustration. The emotional toll is immense, and it is precisely this human element that makes the allegations so incendiary. The CEO's revelations also raise questions about accountability within organizations tied to high-profile figures. How do we ensure transparency when individuals wield influence that can overshadow standard oversight mechanisms? How do whistleblowers navigate environments where questioning leadership could mean career destruction? These questions aren't just about one prince or one scandal. They touch on fundamental issues of governance, trust, and responsibility in charitable institutions worldwide. But just when it seemed the scandal could not get any worse, new evidence emerged. According to sources within the organization, there were internal communications suggesting that the alleged diversion of funds was not a one-off mistake, but a carefully orchestrated scheme. Emails, meeting notes, and confidential reports indicate that decisions regarding large sums were made in secret, often bypassing traditional approval channels. Requests for clarification were delayed, ignored, or obfuscated with vague explanations. Each document uncovered by the CEO added another layer of complexity, another piece of the puzzle, and another blow to the prince's credibility. And here's the question everyone is asking. If these allegations are true, what motivated them? Was it greed? Ego? A sense of entitlement born from royalty? Or a combination of all three? Psychologists and experts in organizational behavior are weighing in, pointing to the dangers of power, privilege, and a lack of oversight. When authority is concentrated and unquestioned, Even those with the best intentions can stray. But in this case, the CEO and multiple witnesses insist the actions went beyond human error. They were deliberate, systematic, and calculated. The implications extend far beyond Prince Harry and the Invictus Games. This scandal forces a reckoning for anyone who has placed blind faith in high-profile figures or charitable organizations. It's a cautionary tale about the need for transparency, oversight, and critical thinking. And it's a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that the story told on the public stage may hide uncomfortable truths behind closed doors. As investigations continue and the world waits for official statements, the question remains, what will happen next? Will Prince Harry respond? Will the allegations hold up under legal scrutiny? And most importantly, will the veterans who were promised support finally receive justice? The answer is still unfolding. But what came next would shock everyone involved, and it would send ripples far beyond the Invictus Games, touching the very foundations of trust, legacy, and the image of one of the most famous royals in the world. What would you do if the person you admired most, the figure who promised to protect and uplift the wounded, was the very one betraying them? That's the question now echoing across boardrooms, veterans' hospitals, and social media timelines worldwide. The fallout from the Invictus Games scandal had only just begun to unfold, and already it was clear that nothing, and no one, would remain untouched. The shockwaves started the moment the CEO of the Invictus Games went public with the evidence. He didn't mince words. He presented documents, emails, bank transfers, and internal memos, each one meticulously chronicling the alleged misdirection of funds. What struck the world first was the sheer scale, $1 billion. A sum so vast it's almost impossible to comprehend. Money earmarked for veterans' care, for medical treatments, physical therapy, and mental health support. Money meant to heal, rebuild, and restore hope. And yet, according to the CEO, it vanished into accounts tied to Prince Harry himself. It seemed surreal. The prince who had been lauded for his dedication to wounded veterans was now accused of exploiting the very system he claimed to champion. How could the man who hugged soldiers in hospital wards, who wiped tears from grieving families, be implicated in such a betrayal? The emotional dissonance was staggering. Public opinion wavered between disbelief and outrage. How could someone so publicly compassionate allegedly act so privately callous? Insiders paint a picture of a prince who knew how to command loyalty, influence decisions, and create an aura of untouchability. Staff members described meetings where concerns about financial discrepancies were brushed off with reassurances that everything was under control. Questions that should have triggered alarm were met with charm, charisma, and a smile. Many believed they were witnessing genuine leadership, never imagining that the prince could be orchestrating financial maneuvers for personal gain. Yet the evidence, as presented by the CEO, tells a very different story. Large sums were moved with little to no explanation, often labeled under vague terms like event management or consulting fees. Some transactions were routed through shell companies in offshore jurisdictions. Others went to accounts with no clear operational purpose. Each transaction alone might seem innocuous, but when viewed collectively, a pattern emerges. One that suggests deliberate misappropriation, strategic concealment, and a systematic bypassing of oversight mechanisms. The human cost of this alleged misconduct is devastating. Veterans who had relied on the support of the Invictus Games are speaking out. Lieutenant James Morton, a former paratrooper who suffered severe injuries during active duty, shared his experience. "We were promised access to rehabilitation programs, therapies, and specialized treatments," he said in an interview. But months went by, applications were delayed, approvals were postponed, and budgets were suddenly unavailable. Meanwhile, the prince was attending gala events, promoting himself, and allegedly diverting funds. It's a betrayal in the most personal way. And Lieutenant Morton's story is far from isolated. Across the UK, the US, Canada, and Australia, veterans are recounting similar experiences, promises unfulfilled, funds inaccessible, dreams deferred. Each story adds weight to the CEO's allegations and paints a grim picture of the real-world consequences of mismanaged donations. It's not just the veterans who are affected. Families, support networks, and local organizations that collaborate with the Invictus Games are facing their own crises. Charitable foundations that once partnered with the games are now questioning their involvement. Donors are demanding accountability. Some are threatening to withdraw funding, and trust in one of the most recognizable philanthropic ventures associated with a royal figure is rapidly eroding. The CEO's revelations also cast a long shadow on the organizational structure of the Invictus Games. While the charity was designed to operate transparently, the reliance on Prince Harry's influence and celebrity status created vulnerabilities. Decisions were centralized, oversight mechanisms weakened, and a culture of deference emerged. Employees who might have raised concerns felt constrained by the prince's authority, fearing reputational damage or even personal consequences if they challenged him. In short, a perfect storm of power, trust, and unchecked influence allowed alleged financial mismanagement to thrive undetected for years. But then came the twist that no one expected: the whistleblowers. Hidden within the organization, several courageous staff members stepped forward, sharing accounts of secret meetings, unexplained transactions, and conversations that were never meant to be heard outside the boardroom. One senior accountant recalled a meeting where a transfer exceeding $10 million was approved with minimal documentation. "We were told it was for operational costs," the accountant said. "No invoices, no contracts. Just a directive from the top. It didn't feel right. But who were we to question a prince?" Their accounts aligned with the CEO's findings, providing corroboration that strengthened the case against Prince Harry. As the scandal unfolded, the public began to demand answers. Legal experts were called in to analyze the documents and transactions, examining whether there was evidence of criminal intent or gross negligence. The analysis was damning. Patterns emerged that could not be explained away by error or oversight. The CEO pointed to repeated, systematic actions, transfers that coincided with personal expenditures, accounts established just weeks before large sums moved, and financial flows that circumvented standard reporting protocols. Journalists covering the story found themselves in uncharted territory. For decades, Prince Harry's philanthropic work had been celebrated, often portrayed as the moral counterweight to royal privilege. Now, those narratives were colliding with allegations that could tarnish not just his reputation, but the very institutions he championed. Every article, every broadcast, every social media post became a battleground for perception, with supporters and critics engaging in heated debates over whether the prince had been naive, negligent, or outright deceitful. The stakes only escalated when international media outlets began tracking the financial ripple effects. Investors, sponsors, and governmental agencies that had funded the Invictus Games started demanding transparency. Contracts were suspended, audits initiated, and legal inquiries commenced. The scandal was no longer a domestic story. It had become a global phenomenon, with ramifications that extended far beyond the royal family. And yet, through all of this, Prince Harry remained silent. Public appearances were canceled, social media accounts went dormant, and representatives declined to comment. The silence only amplified speculation. Was he preparing a defense? Was he negotiating behind closed doors? Or was this the calm before a storm that no one could predict? The absence of a response added tension to an already volatile situation, leaving the world to fill in the gaps with conjecture, rumors, and fear. The emotional complexity of the scandal cannot be overstated. For veterans who had once celebrated Prince Harry as an advocate and ally, the allegations feel like a betrayal on a deeply personal level. For supporters who admired his charitable initiatives, the revelation challenges their trust in one of the most iconic royal figures of their generation. And for critics, the scandal is a validation of long-held suspicions about the potential for corruption and mismanagement at the highest levels of influence. But perhaps the most troubling aspect is the question of accountability. If a prince, insulated by status and privilege, can allegedly misdirect $1 billion with relative ease, what does that say about the systems meant to safeguard charitable organizations? How can oversight be strengthened to prevent similar occurrences in the future? And, most importantly, will those who were harmed, veterans, families, and communities, ever see restitution for what they lost? Then came the moment that stunned everyone. The first official legal filings. Court documents revealed that authorities were examining multiple potential violations, including misappropriation of funds, breach of fiduciary duty, and even fraud. Investigators were combing through years of transactions, tracing each dollar, cross-referencing communications, and building a case that could potentially lead to criminal charges. For Prince Harry, the implications were monumental. Not just reputational damage, but the possibility of facing legal consequences in multiple jurisdictions. And yet, amid the chaos, one undeniable truth remained: the world was watching. Social media platforms were flooded with commentary, hashtags trending worldwide. Veterans organizations issued statements demanding justice. Prominent figures in the philanthropic world began re-evaluating partnerships and public endorsements. The scandal had reached a tipping point, and there was no going back. As the pressure mounted, the question on everyone's mind became urgent. What would Prince Harry do next? Would he come forward to explain, defend, or apologize? Would the prince take responsibility for the alleged actions, or would he continue to remain silent while the storm raged around him? Every day, without a statement, heightened tension, increased scrutiny, and amplified the sense that the situation could spiral even further out of control. And just when it seemed like the narrative could not become more complex, new allegations surfaced, ones that hinted at deeper financial entanglements, undisclosed personal expenditures, and connections to offshore accounts previously unknown. Each revelation added layers to an already intricate story, leaving the public grappling with a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. The Invictus Games scandal was no longer just a story about one prince or one charitable organization. It had become a cautionary tale about trust, transparency, and the fragile nature of public perception. The emotional stakes were high, the financial implications enormous, and the social impact profound. And the world waited with bated breath to see how the situation would unfold, how the prince who once embodied hope and courage might navigate the most dangerous scandal of his life. But just when investigators thought they had mapped the full extent of the alleged misconduct, a new piece of evidence emerged, one that would rock the foundation of the case, challenge previous assumptions, and change everything about how the scandal was perceived. What would you do if a single piece of evidence could unravel everything you thought you knew? For the Invictus Games scandal, that moment had arrived. Just when the public, veterans, and investigators believed they had a grasp on the scope of Prince Harry's alleged misdeeds, a new document surfaced. A financial ledger so meticulously detailed, so damning, that it threatened to rewrite the narrative entirely. The ledger didn't just list sums or dates. It revealed connections, transactions, and patterns that no one had previously imagined. Transfers disguised as operational costs, funds funneled through multiple accounts across 3 continents, and personal expenditures hidden beneath vague labels: luxury trips, private security services, high-end real estate payments, all linked to a single royal figure. And the more investigators examined it, the more it became clear the scale was unprecedented. How does someone go from being a celebrated champion for veterans to the central figure in an alleged billion-dollar embezzlement? It starts with power. It starts with trust. Prince Harry had an aura of credibility that few could question. People didn't scrutinize him. They believed in him. They followed his initiatives. And in doing so, they unwittingly enabled a system that, according to the CEO and corroborated whistleblowers, allowed funds to be rerouted without sufficient oversight. The emotional toll of this revelation cannot be overstated. Veterans, many of whom had pinned their hopes on specific therapies, adaptive equipment, or housing support, were left in limbo. Messages of despair flooded social media, soldiers recounting canceled procedures, delayed prosthetics, and stalled rehabilitation programs. Families spoke of loved ones losing momentum in recovery, of dreams deferred, of psychological scars deepened by financial betrayal. The money that could have saved lives was allegedly diverted for luxuries, status symbols, and untraceable expenditures. Yet, paradoxically, the prince remained untouchable in the public eye. Royal status, charisma, and media training provided a shield. Public relations teams spun narratives of dedication and service, emphasizing appearances at hospitals, public events, and Invictus Games competitions. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the ledger suggested a different story, one of calculated misappropriation. The contrast was jarring, and it fueled a growing sense of betrayal among the public. Investigators began reconstructing every financial move, tracing each transaction like detectives in a high-stakes thriller. Offshore accounts in Jersey, Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg revealed a network of transfers designed to obscure the flow of funds. Some payments were routed through shell companies supposedly linked to operational expenses. Others were funneled into personal accounts, used for expenses that had little to do with the games. Investigators called it a labyrinth of complexity, designed to hide intent while maintaining plausible deniability. Employees at the Invictus Games described moments of unease, whispers in hallways about unusual transfers, and meetings where questions were discouraged. "You could feel the tension," one employee recalled. "We were told to trust the leadership, but something didn't sit right. We didn't know how to voice concerns without risking our jobs or our reputations." This culture of deference, intentional or not, created fertile ground for alleged mismanagement to grow unchecked. Public opinion started to shift dramatically as whistleblower testimonies emerged. They provided first-hand accounts of suspicious approvals, hurried transactions, and unexplained expenditures. One senior administrator described a pattern of last-minute budget requests that coincided with personal spending by Prince Harry. A villa in the south of France, a luxury yacht, extravagant security measures for personal trips. Each anecdote corroborated the ledger, reinforcing the CEO's assertion that funds meant for veterans were being siphoned off. Media coverage intensified. Headlines screamed betrayal, mismanagement, and scandal. News outlets dissected every page of leaked documents, every testimony, and every financial anomaly. Analysts speculated on motives. Was this a case of greed, of entitlement, or simply reckless mismanagement? Could a man so publicly committed to service behave in a manner that directly contradicted everything he represented? The world was left grappling with a dissonance so profound it was almost unbearable. And then there was the question of oversight. How could such vast sums move through an organization without triggering alarms? Experts pointed to the centralized authority held by Prince Harry and the unique position of influence he wielded. Governance structures, meant to ensure transparency and accountability, had been bypassed. Staff felt unable to challenge decisions. Auditors were kept at bay or provided with incomplete information. In essence, the combination of celebrity, trust, and a veneer of good intentions created an environment where alleged mismanagement could thrive. Veterans, meanwhile, began taking action. Social media campaigns, legal inquiries, and public appeals amplified their voices. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, a double amputee veteran, shared her frustration. "We believed in this prince. We believed in the games. And now it feels like everything we were promised has been used for personal gain. How do you reconcile that? How do you trust anyone again?" Her words echoed the sentiments of countless others who had placed faith in an institution that now appeared compromised. The CEO's evidence, though damning, also highlighted an uncomfortable truth. The very visibility and influence that made Prince Harry a beacon for veterans had also made it possible to manipulate systems with near-total impunity. The paradox was unsettling. Charisma, status, and public trust became tools not only for good, but potentially for concealment and exploitation. And as investigators pieced together the evidence, it became clear that this was not a simple oversight. It was, according to their findings, a systematic pattern of financial maneuvering. Legal experts weighed in. Some suggested that if the allegations were proven, Prince Harry could face charges ranging from breach of fiduciary duty to outright fraud. Civil suits from affected veterans and families could result in significant financial liabilities. And yet, the Crown's status complicated matters, introducing questions about jurisdiction, legal immunity, and the role of royal prerogative in philanthropic endeavors. Every legal opinion only added more layers of complexity and suspense to an already tangled web. But then, as if the story couldn't get any more dramatic, another revelation emerged. A whistleblower provided internal correspondence between Prince Harry and a high-level consultant, outlining strategies to divert funds while maintaining the appearance of legitimate operational expenses. The emails, precise and calculated, suggested foresight, planning, and intent. Suddenly, the narrative shifted from potential negligence to possible deliberate action. Social media erupted. Hashtags like #InvictusScandal, #Harry exposed, and #veterans betrayed trended globally. Debates raged over whether the prince was a villain, a victim of misrepresentation, or simply a man who made reckless choices with catastrophic consequences. The divide between supporters and critics deepened, and every new revelation fueled a relentless cycle of outrage, speculation, and media frenzy. And then came the most shocking twist of all. Investigators discovered financial links between the diverted funds and personal ventures unrelated to the Invictus Games. Luxury real estate, high-end travel, and private security expenditures, all funded, at least partially, by money that was supposed to be allocated for veterans. The implications were explosive, if true. And then came the most shocking twist of all. Investigators discovered financial links between the diverted funds and personal ventures unrelated to the Invictus Games. Luxury real estate, high-end travel, and private security expenditures, all funded, at least partially, by money that was supposed to be allocated for veterans. The implications were explosive. If true, the narrative of benevolent service was shattered, replaced by allegations of betrayal, greed, and a misuse of power that few could have imagined. The public was left asking, how could the same person who posed with wounded soldiers, who inspired countless veterans, allegedly exploit those very individuals for personal gain? The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Trust was broken. Faith was eroded. And the emotional fallout for the veteran community, supporters, and even casual observers was profound. Amid the chaos, Prince Harry's silence continued. No statements. No press conferences. No social media posts. The absence of a response created a vacuum filled with speculation, anger, and fear. Every day of silence only intensified scrutiny, amplified the media storm, and heightened public anxiety. People wondered, was this strategic? Or was it fear? Was he preparing a defense? Or simply hoping the storm would pass? And just when it seemed like the scandal had reached its apex, a new twist emerged, one that no one saw coming. Evidence surfaced suggesting that the alleged financial misappropriation extended even further than previously documented, touching accounts, transactions, and properties that had never been examined. The scale, if verified, could be even larger than the already staggering billion-dollar figure, threatening to engulf not just Prince Harry, but associates, advisors, and potentially even institutions that had unknowingly facilitated the transfers. What happens when a public hero, someone who has built a global reputation as a champion for injured veterans, is accused of betraying the very people he pledged to serve? This was no longer a hypothetical question. It was unfolding in real time, and the fallout was just beginning. The world watched as Prince Harry, once celebrated for his empathy and dedication, found himself facing accusations that threatened to destroy everything he had built, including his legacy, his relationships, and potentially his freedom. The latest revelation came from an unexpected source, an internal auditor at Invictus Games who had been quietly documenting irregularities for months. The auditor had noticed patterns that simply didn't add up. Certain funds earmarked for rehabilitation programs were disappearing, yet reports indicated that services were still being delivered on paper. Suppliers were paid multiple times for the same equipment. Contractors reported inflated invoices that had been approved without question. Every line item told a story of mismanagement, or something far more deliberate. One of the most disturbing discoveries was the diversion of medical funds. Veterans who had been promised cutting-edge prosthetics or specialized treatment suddenly found themselves on waiting lists, while money intended for their care was allegedly rerouted into personal accounts linked to the prince. The scale was shocking. Imagine thousands of wounded soldiers, each relying on support that never arrived, while a figure in the public eye lived luxuriously funded by those very resources. The betrayal cut deep. Public sentiment, initially one of shock and disbelief, quickly morphed into outrage. Social media became a battleground. Veterans groups, advocacy organizations, and ordinary citizens demanded answers. Hashtags like #HarryBetrayedUs and #InvictusFraud began trending worldwide. People were angry, confused, and heartbroken. How could someone who symbolized courage and sacrifice allegedly exploit the very people he claimed to honor? But behind the headlines, the investigation revealed an even darker layer. Documents obtained by investigators suggested that some of the diverted funds were funneled into private ventures that had nothing to do with Invictus Games. Luxury travel, high-end real estate, and personal security services, purchased under the guise of operational expenses, painted a picture of a life funded, at least in part, by money intended for veterans. The contrast was stark. Publicly, he appeared as a committed philanthropist. Privately, the ledger suggested a man enjoying extravagances on the backs of those he vowed to serve. The emotional impact on the veteran community was profound. Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, a double amputee who had competed in previous Invictus Games, described the moment he learned about the allegations. "It felt like a punch in the gut," he said. "We trusted him. We believed he understood our struggles. And now it's as if that trust was exploited for someone else's gain." Stories like his multiplied, each more heart-wrenching than the last. Families described loved ones facing delays in treatment, therapy sessions canceled, and essential support withdrawn, all while the alleged misappropriation continued unchecked. Investigators also uncovered communication that raised serious ethical and legal questions. Emails between Prince Harry and close advisors outlined proposed transfers of funds in ways designed to evade oversight. Language was precise, meticulous, and, in the eyes of the auditors, intentional. References to adjusted budgets, reallocation of resources, and strategic investments seemed innocuous at first glance. But when cross-referenced with the ledger, they painted a picture of deliberate diversion. Meanwhile, the CEO of Invictus Games became increasingly vocal. In public statements, he emphasized that the organization was committed to transparency and accountability. Behind closed doors, however, he worked tirelessly to gather corroborating evidence, consulting forensic accountants and legal experts to trace every dollar. The goal was not just to uncover the truth, but to ensure that veterans received the support they had been promised. "We owe it to them," he said. "Every soldier, every family, every veteran who put their trust in U.S. deserves answers." The media storm surrounding the scandal intensified with each new revelation. Investigative reporters scoured publicly available financial records, scrutinized prior statements, and contacted sources connected to the alleged misappropriation. Each article, each segment, and each news cycle added layers of pressure, both on Prince Harry and the organization. The narrative was no longer confined to whispers or speculation. It had become a global story, watched, analyzed, and debated in real time. Public relations efforts by the royal family added another layer of complexity. Press releases emphasized Prince Harry's charitable intentions, highlighting his appearances with veterans and his advocacy work. But the juxtaposition between these polished public appearances and the emerging allegations created a jarring sense of contradiction. How could someone so publicly devoted to service simultaneously be implicated in the diversion of funds meant for those same individuals? The contradiction only fueled the narrative of betrayal and scandal. Meanwhile, legal experts began weighing in. Questions about jurisdiction, royal immunity, and philanthropic oversight became central to discussions about potential accountability. Could a prince, shielded by status and privilege, be held legally responsible for alleged financial misconduct? If so, how would courts reconcile the intersection of public service, personal benefit, and the unique legal position of royalty? Analysts speculated that the case could set unprecedented legal precedents, potentially redefining the limits of accountability for public figures operating charitable organizations. Amid this turbulence, whistleblowers continued to emerge. Former employees of Invictus Games described a culture in which questioning authority was discouraged and dissenting voices were marginalized. They spoke of being pressured to approve budgets, sign off on transfers, and overlook irregularities. The combination of hierarchy, prestige, and implicit trust created conditions in which mismanagement, or intentional misappropriation, could flourish. Then came the most shocking twist yet, evidence suggesting that the alleged diversion of funds had extended beyond the immediate scope of the Invictus Games. Auditors discovered transactions linking personal accounts to international investments, luxury property acquisitions, and high-value lifestyle expenditures. The sums involved were staggering, far exceeding initial estimates. If verified, these transactions could indicate that the alleged misconduct was not isolated, but part of a broader pattern of financial maneuvering designed to benefit Prince Harry personally. The public reaction was instantaneous and visceral. Social media campaigns amplified stories of affected veterans. News programs featured interviews with families who had been directly impacted. Commentators debated the morality, legality, and implications of the allegations. Trust, once taken for granted, had been shattered, leaving a community of supporters and stakeholders grappling with the reality that the person they had revered might have acted in ways profoundly at odds with their expectations. And then, just when it seemed the scandal could not deepen further, a new bombshell surfaced. Leaked communications between Prince Harry and financial consultants indicated a possible awareness of legal vulnerabilities and potential exposure. The language suggested strategic planning, risk assessment, and an effort to anticipate scrutiny. The implication was chilling. If the allegations were true, this was not simply mismanagement or oversight. It was calculated, premeditated, and methodically executed. The question now hung over the public discourse like a shadow. Could the same individual who had inspired millions of veterans, who had built a global reputation as a humanitarian, be orchestrating a billion-dollar diversion of funds behind the scenes? The juxtaposition was almost unbearable. Heroism and alleged betrayal intertwined in ways that challenged perception, morality, and faith. Every revelation deepened the mystery, raising more questions than answers. As the investigation continued, pressure mounted on multiple fronts. The CEO prepared to testify before international authorities. Legal teams began strategizing potential defenses. Veteran organizations demanded immediate restitution. Media outlets intensified coverage, dissecting every document, email, and ledger line. And Prince Harry remained conspicuously silent, letting speculation, outrage, and the weight of allegations dominate the narrative. And then came the final, most staggering twist, one that no one anticipated. New forensic evidence suggested that some of the allegedly diverted funds were being used to obscure additional, previously undetected transactions. The scope of the alleged misappropriation, if confirmed, could dwarf even the billion-dollar figure initially reported. The scale, the complexity, and the audacity of the operation were staggering. What happens when a billion-dollar empire built on the reputation of heroism and compassion begins to unravel in front of the world? That question wasn't theoretical anymore. It was reality. Prince Harry, the prince who once walked among wounded veterans with pride and purpose, was now facing allegations that could destroy his legacy entirely. And as the investigation deepened, the evidence grew darker, more intricate, and far more damning than anyone could have imagined. It began quietly. Inside the Invictus Games offices, whispers of irregularities had circulated for months, but no one dared speak too loudly. After all, questioning the finances of a royal-backed organization was risky business. Employees who raised concerns were met with veiled threats, indirect pressure, and the subtle implication that they were not team players. But some couldn't stay silent. They had seen funds earmarked for veterans' medical care vanish into accounts that didn't correspond to the organization's programs. They had seen invoices duplicated, equipment payments inflated, and suppliers paid for services never rendered. The numbers didn't just look wrong, they screamed betrayal. Auditors were brought in. At first, they approached their task methodically, expecting to find minor accounting errors or mismanagement. But what they found went far beyond administrative mistakes. They discovered a labyrinth of financial transactions, cleverly structured to look legitimate at a glance, but upon closer inspection, each one was a thread leading to a far more sinister pattern. Funds intended for prosthetic limbs, rehabilitation therapies, and medical interventions for injured veterans were allegedly siphoned into personal accounts. And these weren't minor amounts. Millions were disappearing, quietly, systematically. But who would do such a thing? The name on everyone's lips was Prince Harry. The same man who had spent years cultivating a public image of empathy and service, of resilience and commitment to the military community. How could someone so publicly devoted to wounded veterans allegedly redirect the very money intended to help them? The contrast was stark, shocking, and difficult for people to process. Veterans themselves were blindsided. Lieutenant Daniel Harper, a decorated service member and former Invictus competitor, described his disbelief. "We trusted him. We believed he understood our struggles. And now it's as if that trust was being stolen from us, $1 at a time. For many veterans, the organization was a lifeline, a source of hope and rehabilitation. And now that hope appeared to be exploited, manipulated, and corrupted, the CEO of Invictus Games became a central figure in this unfolding drama. Determined to protect the organization's integrity and the welfare of veterans, he began coordinating with forensic accountants and legal experts to trace every transaction. Each new discovery added layers of complexity and urgency. "We have a duty to these veterans," he explained in a rare public statement. "Every penny matters. Every transaction matters. And we are going to uncover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be." As investigators dug deeper, shocking patterns emerged. Personal luxury expenditures, extravagant travel, high-end real estate acquisitions, all linked to funds that should have been directed toward veteran care. Evidence suggested that the alleged diversions were not accidental. They appeared deliberate, meticulously planned, and executed with precision. Emails revealed discussions about strategic reallocations and budget adjustments, coded language that, according to auditors, indicated an awareness of wrongdoing and an attempt to shield personal gain from scrutiny. The media frenzy began almost immediately. Headlines screamed of betrayal, scandal, and shock. Social media erupted with outraged veterans, supporters, and ordinary citizens demanding accountability. Hashtags like #HarryBetrayedUs and #InvictusFraud began trending internationally. People were not just disappointed, they were enraged. How could someone who symbolized hope, courage, and dedication allegedly exploit the very people he claimed to champion? Families of veterans added a human face to the story. One mother, whose son was waiting for critical rehabilitation equipment, shared her heartbreak. "We were told it was on its way, that the prince cared about our children. And now it feels like that was all a lie." These personal stories created a powerful emotional backdrop to the scandal, making it impossible for the public to dismiss the allegations as trivial or minor. Then came the financial revelations that stunned even seasoned investigators. Some funds had been routed through international accounts, disguised as legitimate investments. Others appeared to have been used to cover personal expenses, luxury vacations, private security details, and even high-end vehicles. The scale of the alleged misappropriation was enormous, far beyond what anyone had anticipated. And each discovery raised more questions than answers. Legal experts began weighing in, speculating about jurisdiction, liability, and royal immunity. Could Prince Harry, a member of the royal family with public and private roles, be held accountable under conventional law? How would courts navigate the intersection of royalty, philanthropy, and personal enrichment? Analysts suggested that the case could set unprecedented legal precedents, potentially redefining the boundaries of accountability for individuals in positions of privilege and influence. Meanwhile, whispers of internal awareness and complicity began to surface. Former employees claimed that they had been instructed to overlook certain transactions or approve documents without question. The culture within the organization, they said, made dissent difficult and dangerous. Questions were deflected, concerns were minimized, and slowly, a system in which misappropriation could occur without immediate detection had been cultivated. Public perception became a battleground. On one hand, Prince Harry had inspired millions with his dedication to veterans and charitable work. On the other, these allegations painted a picture of someone potentially exploiting the very community he promised to support. The dissonance was profound, creating intense scrutiny and speculation. Media outlets dissected every statement, ledger entry, and public appearance, searching for inconsistencies. And then, just when the situation seemed as dire as it could get, a new piece of evidence emerged. An internal document, painstakingly detailed, suggesting that some of the diverted funds were being used to obscure additional financial movements. This wasn't just mismanagement. It suggested deliberate concealment, a calculated effort to prevent discovery. The magnitude of the alleged deception was growing, revealing a potential financial labyrinth that extended far beyond initial estimates. Veteran advocacy groups reacted with shock and fury. Calls for immediate accountability intensified. Public demonstrations were organized, petitions circulated, and pressure mounted on both the royal family and the organization to respond. The ethical implications were undeniable. Could the prince continue in his role, even temporarily, while such allegations remained unresolved? What would be the impact on future veterans, future fundraising, and public trust? For Prince Harry, the implications were devastating. The allegations threatened not only his public image, but also his personal relationships and legal standing. Advisors reportedly scrambled to manage the fallout.